In this video, we'll see how to work with Angular directives. Angular directives are used to power up the HTML.
How it's going to power up the HTML in the sense, when you say input type equal to text, it will just create a text box. But when I specify ng model as a directive there, it performs two-way binding, right? So when it comes to directive in Angular, there are two types of directives are there. They are, let me create it as a panel. The first one is structural directives. The another one is attribute directives. So in Angular, there are two types of directive. One is structural directive, another one is attribute directive. There is a slight difference between a component and a directive. You all know how to create a component. So if you look at this is your component. How it differs from directive in this sense, component is also directive. In fact, component is also directive, but how it differs from directive means with this option. Component will have a template, whereas directive won't have a template. So the major difference between the component and the directive is component will have a template, whereas directive doesn't have the template. Priorly, some people used to call component is also a directive. They used to call it as component directive. It doesn't look good, right? Component means it's a separate one, but it will act like a directive. How? It is powering up the HTML. As soon as I specify app-root, it does a lot of work. Then it is a directive only, right? We are creating our own custom element. That's the concept of directive. But in Angular, don't mix this with directive. Components are different with directive. In what way? Component will have a template, whereas directive won't have a template. So directives are getting divided into two directives. They are structural directive and attribute directive. So as of now, you should see something like this. So we have the structural directive and attribute directives. And I'm just going to, in this demo, I'll just show you how to use the documentation page. That's another important thing. So let me open our angular.io. This is your official website. And as I told to you, the version 6 got released. So it's time for us to, after learning the Angular 5, you can just go into the Angular 6 as well. But I'm just moving into the documentation page. There you can see the latest version is 6.0.3, whereas our version, you can find out by looking at the page source, or let me open the element tab. I'm using 5.2.9. Okay, so we are in the version 5. So if I want to work with Angular 5 version, select that particular version 5. So now it displays that particular version. So if you look at this, these are all the versions. Version 2, version 2, version 4, version 5 and version 6. Okay, these are all the major versions released in the Angular. So if you know version 5, obviously you can work in the version 4 and version 2 as well. There will be some small changes, minor changes will be there, but you can manage. So similarly, if you know version 2, in version 4 they had provided some additional features, small feature, and especially lot of changes are happened in the way they execute the Angular. Rather than the new feature, the way they execute the fastness of compiling the application and all this stuff got drastically changed. So if you know 2, you can work in 4 and 5 as well, and similar way, if you know 5, you can just go back and work in these two versions. Okay, but there is a slight lot of differences are there between version 4 and version 5, but when it's 2 and 4, it is almost same. Anyway, since the latest version is 6, rather concentrating on 4 and 2, henceforth just concentrate between version 5 and version 6. Okay, so now I'm just going into the documentation page of version 5. In this documentation page, you can see the API part. When I click API, it displays everything. Now I'm just going to concentrate on the directive part. So in the type, we are selecting, it's not a class, we are going to work with the directive. So select directive. Do you want to see all the directives? Stable directives or deprecated, experimental? Obviously, I want to look at the stable directives. So in the stable directives, so these are all the possible directives we have. And if you look at this, these are all the packages, common packages as these directives. So I hope you all know common package is the default module, which by default it is added as a dependency module. I don't want to add this as explicitly as a dependency module, so that we can directly use those directives for free. And if you want to use any one of the directive from this particular package, that is forms package, for example ng model directive, if I want to use ng model directive, then we need to include that form module as a dependency module in the import section of your app.module.ts. Otherwise we cannot use this ng model. And similarly, if I want to use any of the module which is specified here, we need to use router module. Okay, so we are going to work with this common module. So in this common module, we have, these are all the inbuilt directives available. These directives are further classified into structural directive and attribute directive. So what is the structural directive? Structural directive means a directive which changes the layout of the DOM, which is used to change the layout of the DOM, is called a structural directive. So let me start with the demo. Under the structural directive, so the first directive that we are going to see here is H2. There I'm just coming up with this directive. The first directive is ngIf directive. This ngIf is a structural directive. So to illustrate this, I'm just going to create one property here. The property is show status, which is of a Boolean type. Let me have a constructor. In the constructor, I'm going to initialize this show status, or let it be show div. By default, it is true. I'm just assigning it to true. Okay, there is a property called show div, which is assigned with the value true. Now, inside this, I'm just going to have a div tag. In this div tag, I'm just specifying this detail, that is, this div is displayed because show div property is set to true. So I want to bind that. To do it, I want to use this. So what is the usage of this ngIf structural directive? Means it is used to whether add that particular element in the DOM or remove it from the DOM. So if I specify that ngIf, I need to know how to use it. So to use it, they are very clearly specified. It should be used as a attribute directive, because this is attribute selector. So we need to use it as an attribute directive. And how to use it, they will give the description, everything is there. Okay, so since it is a structural directive, first of all, it needs to be used as an attribute, because the selector is attribute directive, and it is a structural directive because it is going to change the layout of the DOM. It is going to inject it or remove it. So all the structural directive needs to be prefixed with star in front of it. ngIf equal to, just specify that show div. So since the show div is set to true, it will be displayed. You can see that this div is displayed. That's okay. So you can see that this div is displayed because show div property is set to true. What about if I set it to false? So condition becomes false. So as a result, it won't display. So what is the usage of ngIf structural directive? It is used to show or hide the elements from the DOM. Not hide, it is used to show or remove the elements from the DOM. Now it is totally removed. That particular div tag is not there in the DOM. When I say true, it will be injected to the DOM. So since it is changing the layout of the DOM, it is coming under the structural directive. So structural directives will change the layout of the DOM. So I just want to make this using an interactive way. Let me create it through a button. In the click of the button, I want to show and hide it. So like I'm just creating a button. So in this button, I'm just going to say show or hide the div. So this button should have a class btn. Okay, btn primary, which will create a primary button. So when I click this button, I want to call a function. The function name is toggle the status. So you all know where to write this function. It should be in the component.ts. Toggle status needs to do only one thing, like this dot show div. If it is false, set it to true. If it is true, set it to false. So I can say not of show div. Simple. So when I click this button, henceforth it's going to call the show div. Based on that, it's just going to set true or false. On that result, it's going to show the div or hide the div. So look at this. Right now it is false. Click, it becomes true. Okay, I hope you all understood this. But now I told you this is the perfect place to explain you the concept of interpolation. So in interpolation, for example, we have the button here, right? In the button, I'm just displaying show or hide div. Instead of that, I'm just going to show, so I want to do some interpolation work here based on the property. If the show div is set to true, if it is true, I just want to display something. If it is false, I want to display something. If it is set to true, okay, I'm just using the ternary operator. If it is true, hide the div. If it is false, show the div. Look at the way how we are doing the interpolation here. If it is true, it will be hide div. If otherwise, the caption will be determined based on the property. So save it. Look at this, we got the show div, hide div. So I hope you all understood the usage of ngIf structural directive. So why it is called a structural directive? Because it changes the layout of the DOM. All the structural directive needs to be prefixed with star in front of that. How to use ngIf? ngIf needs to be used as an attribute selector. Okay. Now I'm having a function, but this function is not doing something big. It's a very small, in fact, it is a one-liner, right? So instead of writing it as a function, I can write that logic in the view part itself. Remember, when to do that sort of things means if the task is very small, if the implementation is not that much big, you can directly write it here. Instead of calling the function, I can just simply say not of show div. When I click, it will just set the value. Just a minute. So we have the click button, F12. Have I saved it? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we need to assign it, sorry for that. Show div equal to not of show div. Directly we can finish off the task. See this. But since the logic is very small, you can finish off. But I personally prefer that we should not provide the implementation logic in the view, but we have a shortcut way to write the code directly here. Okay, so yes, so I hope you all understood the ng if part. Now we are moving into the next one, that is ng for off. So I'm just creating a copy of this part, or we'll go ahead with so the next structural directive that we are going to see here is ng for off. So when we require this ng for off means especially when we are working with collection. For instance, let me have the cities here. Cities is going to be an array of string. You can specify it like this, and let me initialize it with this dot cities equal to, we have an array of cities, and you all know in JavaScript if you want to work with array we need to provide this pair of square brackets. So now we have 3 cities here. I just want to, right now it is in the property stage, so this properties needs to be binded, means only 2 options in the HTML. If I want to show that, either I need to go with interpolation or else with the property binding. But see the problem here in the ng for of structural directive. If I want to display the cities in a unordered list, okay, I'm just saying cities in unordered list. Okay, I want unordered list with 3 list items, so you can just generate it with the emmet snippet li into 3. Sorry, ul should have li should have 3. Now we got the list item. We can go for the interpolation very easily and simply say cities of 0, cities of 1, cities of 2. Like this we can go ahead. This is one option, but this is not the best practice. Is it cities? This dot cities has been assigned. You can see that it displays the cities, but this is not the best practice. So which is the best practice in the sense we are supposed to use the ng for of stuff. So ng for of is mainly used whenever you are going to work with a collection of items. So they are given you how to use it. The full documentation is there. So it's going to be a what to say, attribute directive. So I want to repeat this part. This list item needs to be repeated for a number of cities. So there I supposed to use ng for. Remember this syntax, let singular of plural, or if you are from the Java background you can remember system.out.println SOP, singular of plural. So singular is going to be city, of plural is cities. So each and every time it will take one city that will be placed here. Done. So save it. So this will iterate it and it display the result. So output is going to be the same. Okay, why can't I try it with one more demo with the ng for of. This time let me go ahead with some employees label. I'm just having employees, that is, let me create a collection of employee. So employees is a array of objects. So how to specify that? In the sense, we can simply go ahead with array of object. This dot employees equal to an array. This time it's an array of object. Employee means they should have an ID and the name. Okay, now we have 3 employees here. Okay, and as a best practice, always right click, format the document. So we have 3 employees. I just want to bind this in a drop down list. Okay, so you all know how to do that. Going back here, okay, drop down list, select, I'm not interested in name and ID. This option, okay, option, I want to have an option tag. In this option tag, once again, star ng for equal to, let singular of plural, let employee of employees. So each and every time it's going to give one employee. In the value, I want to have, okay, value is a property binding. So I can simply say employee.id. And here I can use interpolation, employee.name. So save it. And this one, class equal to form dash control. This is a bootstrap stuff, so that the drop down list will take the responsiveness. So employees, it displays Karthik, Ganesh and Abhishek. At the same time, when I inspect this element, you should see the value 1, 2 and 3 is there. And if you want, you can specify some more items, like let I equal to index. So when I specify index, then I can get the index position. So we'll get the index. See that 0, 1 and 2. So there are a lot of other options are there. You can just simply go through the documentation page. So these are all the other values, like index I have used. First is there, last is there, even is there, odd is there. So this variable names, this name special variable can be used here. But there is one problem here. What will happen if suppose I provide instead of name, okay, in the place of name, I'm just saying employee name. This is possible, right? Because it's an object array, it can take any key, any values and all those stuff. But I want to restrict it because we are using TypeScript. So since we are using TypeScript, it is always good to have a model. So I'm going to introduce you a concept called model here. So to create the model or to create the shape, this is how it looks. Create a new folder called models. Inside the models, I'm just going to create a new file called employee.ts. Okay, to create a model or a shape, you can go ahead, simply specify an interface, export an interface called employee. Don't create it as a class. Class will have the behavior as well. Interface here, I'll be just saying just a declaration, just a shape. This is how it looks. It should have, employee means it should have an ID. ID must be a number. It should have a name. Name must be a string. And we have exported that interface. So instead of array of object, I can say array of employee. So what is this employee? Employee, we need to bind it, right? We need to import it. So this time I'm not going to type it. Instead of that, place the cursor here. You can see a small bulb icon. Click, it will say import the employee from module. It will automatically, when you click, it will automatically import it. Okay, you can write it like this, or otherwise you can even write it like this, employee array. Look at this, now it throws error because it is not created as per the shape that we have created. So if I say name, it should be compulsorily string. If you do this, this will throw error. So now we have implemented that part and it works as we expected. So in this we have seen ng for of, as well as I have just shown you how to work with models. Okay, so we have seen two structural directives so far, ngIf and ng for of. ngIf is used to add or remove the element from the DOM, whereas ng for of is used to iterate a collection and put it into the DOM. Now I'm going to discuss with you on another directive. Let me take it from the documentation page. Let me go ahead with ng switch default. So this is a structural directive. So ng switch default. Going back to my app component.ts. Similarly, can't we use any conditional in ngIf also? Yes, ngIf, that's a syntax. You cannot do that. ngIf, it just take the property, it will take true or false. Based on that, it's going to work. If it is true, it will display. If it is false, it won't. Okay, now please listen. So now we are moving into this ng switch default. So for that, I'm just copying this div class once again. So we have closed the div tag. So to illustrate this demo, I'll make it very simple. I'm just going to have one variable here called counter, which is going to be of number type, and let me initialize that with this dot counter equal to 0. So default, it's having the value 0. Here I'm just displaying a span tag. In the span tag, I'm specifying counter with the value 0. That is, I'm just using interpolation to bring the data. Right click, format the document. Okay, then we are going to have one button as well. In that button, I'm just saying increment the counter button with a class btn dash primary. Okay, when I click this button, I just want to increment the counter. So can I give it here itself counter equal to counter plus 1? We can do that, right? It's a very simple operation. So when I click that button, it's just going to increment the counter so that you can see that property will be get changed and it will be get displayed here. Okay, now I'm just going to use this ng switch default. Guys, please don't remember anything. Everything is there in the API. Go back and take the syntax. So they are saying how to use it. So I'm just copying this. Okay, after this I'm just going to have a div tag, or let me paste it. The container element is going to be my div. I'm just having a div. Okay, so ng switch expression is going to be counter. I'm using div ng switch case matching the expression. If it is 0, I'm just simply typing 0. Div. So let me do that till 1, 2, 3 and 4. If it is 1, and if it is 2, and if it is 3, and finally this is 4, and finally the last one is for the switch default. Div not supported. So this is self-explanatory, you can understand, nothing special here. So I'm not getting any proper use case how we can implement this in your project. If you require to go ahead with multiple stuff, if I want to, based on an expression, I want to evaluate with multiple things, don't go with nested if else statement or a continuous else if ladder kind of stuff. Better we can use this switch case. Okay, just an idea. So save this. So based on the counter value, it's just going to inject it and remove it. Look at this. So it's 0, so it's printing 0. Click, so it says 1, 2, 3, 4, then not supported. So with this, the structural directives come to an end.